The final mission was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Daniel, Maria, Alex, and Karen moved through the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the chaos around them. Alien ships loomed overhead, locked in a brutal battle between the Architects' forces and the Mediators' faction. Explosions lit up the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The team had one goal: infiltrate the Architects' command ship and disable its core. They reached the outskirts of the alien fleet using a stolen transport vessel, its systems modified by Alex to mimic the invaders' technology. Maria navigated carefully, her hands steady on the controls despite the tension in the air. "We're close," she whispered, glancing at the radar. "Just a little farther." As they approached the massive command ship, Karen double-checked the resonance device strapped to her belt. "This has to work," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "If it doesn't." "It will," Daniel interrupted firmly. His voice carried a confidence he didn't fully feel, but he knew doubt wouldn't help them now. The team boarded the ship under the cover of darkness, slipping past distracted guards who were focused on the battle raging outside. The interior was cold and sterile, filled with glowing panels and strange symbols etched into the walls. Every step felt like walking into the unknown, but they pressed on, guided by Maria's calculations of where the core might be located. When they finally reached the heart of the ship, they found themselves face to face with the Architect. It stood tall and imposing, its glowing eyes fixed on them with an almost mechanical calm. "You are persistent," it said, its voice resonating in their minds. "But persistence does not equate to victory." Daniel stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "You underestimated us. That's your mistake." Without hesitation, Karen activated the resonance device, aiming it directly at the core behind the Architect. The machine hummed to life, emitting a high-frequency pulse that caused the entire ship to shudder. Sparks flew from the walls as systems began to fail, and the Architect staggered, its form flickering like a faulty light. "This ends now," Maria shouted, her voice filled with defiance. For a moment, it seemed like they had won. The core destabilized, and alarms blared throughout the ship. But then the Architect raised a limb, its body stabilizing as it drew power from an unseen source. "Your efforts are futile," it declared. Before anyone could react, the Mediator appeared, emerging from the shadows. Without a word, it attacked the Architect, the two figures clashing in a burst of energy. The room shook violently, and the team scrambled to escape as the ship began to collapse. They ran through the corridors, dodging falling debris and collapsing floors. Behind them, the sound of destruction grew louder. When they finally burst out onto the deck, they saw the command ship breaking apart, consumed by flames. Above them, the Mediator's forces retreated, leaving the Architect's army in disarray. As dawn broke over the horizon, the survivors gathered in the ruins of New York City. Civilians emerged from hiding, their faces filled with a mix of relief and disbelief. The aliens were gone, for now, but the scars of the invasion would remain for generations. Maria looked at Daniel, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "We did it," she said softly. "Against all odds, we won." Daniel nodded, though his expression remained somber. "It's not over. We've proven we can fight back, but rebuilding won't be easy." Karen placed a hand on Alex's shoulder, both of them too tired to speak. Around them, people began the long process of picking up the pieces. Homes would need to be rebuilt, lives restored. But for the first time in weeks, there was hope. In the distance, the Mediator watched silently before disappearing into the stars. Its role in humanity's survival was undeniable, but its future and its allegiance remained uncertain. As Daniel gazed at the sunrise, he allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to give up. They had been battered, broken, and pushed to the brink, but they had endured. And that, he realized, was what made them truly unstoppable. The aftermath of the battle left New York City in ruins, its once bustling streets now littered with debris and smoke. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and ash, a grim reminder of the cost of resistance. But amid the devastation, there was a flicker of hope. The resonance devices had proven effective, crippling parts of the alien forces and showing humanity that victory was possible, even against such overwhelming odds. Daniel stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, his hands gripping the edge of the concrete barrier. His face was streaked with dirt, and exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but his eyes remained sharp. Maria approached quietly, holding out a bottle of water. "We've done what we can for now," she said softly, "but they'll be back." Daniel nodded, taking the sip of water. "They underestimated us today. Next time, they won't make that mistake." Maria glanced at the skyline, where alien ships still hovered like silent predators. "The Mediator's intervention made a difference," she said. "But I don't think it'll last. If the architect finds out who helped us, we'll deal with that when it comes." Daniel interrupted, though his tone betrayed a hint of unease. He knew that relying on an alien faction, no matter how sympathetic, was risky. Trust wasn't something he could afford to give freely, not in a fight like this. Meanwhile, Alex and Karen worked tirelessly to repair damaged resonance devices and prepare new ones for future battles. Their makeshift workshop was cramped and chaotic, filled with tools, wires, and scraps of alien technology. Karen sat cross-legged on the floor, soldering wires together, while Alex typed furiously on his laptop. Despite their fatigue, neither showed any sign of slowing down. "We need more range," Alex muttered, adjusting the settings on one of the devices. "If we can amplify the frequency, we might be able to target their ships directly." Karen nodded, her focus unwavering. "I'll see what I can do. But we're running low on materials. We'll need to scavenge soon." As they worked, Alex paused, glancing at Karen. "Do you ever wonder what happens if we win?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. Karen looked up, surprised by the question. "Winning doesn't mean much if we lose ourselves in the process," she replied. "But yeah, sometimes I think about it. A world without them. It feels impossible to imagine." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Daniel and Maria entered the room, carrying fresh supplies salvaged from abandoned shops. "The resistance is regrouping," Daniel said. "People are scared, but they're ready to keep fighting." Maria added, "Word is spreading about what happened here. Other cities are starting to organize. We've lit a fire under them." But the mood shifted when Alex received an alert on his laptop. His expression darkened as he turned the screen toward the group. On it was footage of the Mediator's forces engaging the Architect's army in open combat. Ships clashed in the sky, beams of energy crisscrossing like deadly fireworks. Below, ground troops fought fiercely, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. "They're tearing each other apart," Alex said, his voice hollow. "This is what we wanted, right? For them to turn on each other." "It's not enough," Maria replied sharply. "If they destroy each other, it won't guarantee our survival. We still have to finish this ourselves." Daniel stepped forward, his jaw tightening. "Then we hit them where it hurts most, their leadership. If we can take out the Architect, we might be able to end this." The plan was dangerous, almost suicidal. Infiltrating the heart of the alien fleet would require precision, courage, and a lot of luck. But none of them hesitated. They knew that hesitation meant defeat, and defeat wasn't an option. As they prepared for the mission, Karen pulled Alex aside. Her hands trembled slightly as she handed him a small, modified resonance device. "This is for you," she said, "just in case." Alex forced a smile, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "Thanks. I'll try not to need it." That night, as the team gathered one last time before heading out, Karen spoke up. Her voice was steady, though tinged with emotion. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember why we're doing this. Not just for us, but for everyone who's counting on us." Daniel nodded, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "We've come too far to give up now. No matter what, we keep moving forward." With those words, they set off into the darkness, their resolve unshaken. Above them, the stars twinkled faintly, obscured by the glow of alien ships. Humanity's fight for survival hung by a thread. But that thread was strong, woven from the courage and determination of ordinary people, refusing to bow to despair. The attack on New York City began without warning. Alien ships descended in formation, their sleek surfaces gleaming under the pale morning light. Energy beams lanced down from above, striking buildings and streets with devastating precision. The architect's forces had come to deliver a message: surrender or face total annihilation. For the people of Earth, there was no longer any room for doubt. The aliens wouldn't stop until humanity was wiped out. Daniel, Maria, Alex, and Karen stood on the outskirts of the city, watching as chaos unfolded. Columns of smoke rose into the sky, and the distant rumble of collapsing structures echoed through the air. Civilians fled in every direction, desperate to escape the destruction. It was clear that this wasn't just an assault, it was a demonstration of power, meant to crush any remaining hope of resistance. "We can't let them win," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the fear gripping his chest. "If we fall back now, it's over." Maria nodded, clutching one of the resonance devices tightly. "We hit them hard and fast. Disrupt their systems, then pull back before they can counterattack. If we can take out even one ship, it'll show everyone we can fight back." Karen adjusted the straps of her backpack, which carried more of the handheld tools. "Let's move. We don't have time to waste." The team split up, each heading toward a different target. Daniel and Maria made their way to a cluster of alien drones guarding a supply depot, while Alex and Karen approached a communication relay nearby. The streets were eerily empty, save for the occasional flash of movement as survivors darted between ruined buildings. Every step felt heavy, weighed down by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything. As Daniel and Maria reached the depot, they crouched behind a pile of rubble. Dozens of drones patrolled the area, their glowing eyes scanning for threats. Maria activated the resonance device, setting it to emit a high-frequency pulse designed to destabilize the aliens' technology. "Ready," she whispered. Daniel nodded, gripping a makeshift weapon tightly. "Do it." Maria pressed the button, and the device hummed to life. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the drones began to falter. Their movements slowed, and sparks flew from their metallic bodies as the frequency disrupted their internal systems. Within moments, they collapsed, lifeless heaps of metal scattered across the ground. "It worked," Maria exclaimed, though her voice was barely audible over the distant sounds of battle. Before they could celebrate, however, a massive alien ship loomed overhead. Its shadow stretched across the landscape, blotting out the sun. A hatch opened, and reinforcements poured out, more drones, along with towering figures clad in armor. Maria and Daniel exchanged a glance. They couldn't take them all on alone. Meanwhile, Alex and Karen had reached the communication relay. Using the resonance tool, they managed to disable part of the system, cutting off the flow of information between ships. But as they worked, Karen noticed something strange. A group of civilians hiding nearby, armed with whatever weapons they could find. She waved them over. "You want to help? Now's your chance," she said, handing them crude versions of the resonance devices she'd built earlier. Together, the unlikely alliance launched a coordinated strike, overwhelming the alien guards and destroying the relay. Explosions lit up the sky as the structure crumbled, sending shockwaves through the invaders' network. For a brief moment, the tide seemed to turn. Back at the depot, Daniel and Maria found themselves surrounded. Just as things looked hopeless, the mediator appeared, flanked by its own faction. Without hesitation, it turned on the architect's forces, engaging them in fierce combat. The unexpected betrayal created enough confusion for Daniel and Maria to slip away. By nightfall, the battle raged on, neither side gaining a decisive advantage. Exhausted but determined, The team regrouped on the edge of the city. They were battered and bruised, but alive. And for now, that was enough. Humanity had shown its resilience, refusing to bow even in the face of overwhelming odds. As they gazed at the burning skyline, Daniel spoke softly. They thought they could break us, but they underestimated what we're capable of. In the distance, the Mediator watched silently, its actions having tipped the scales, but at great cost. The division among the aliens had deepened, and the war for Earth was far from over. The team worked tirelessly through the night, poring over the data provided by the Mediator. Alex's laptop buzzed with activity as he decrypted layers of alien code, while Maria cross-referenced the schematics with their own research. The information was staggering. Details about the aliens' energy sources, communication networks, and even the weak points in their ships. For the first time, they felt like they had a real chance to fight back. Karen focused on building new weapons using the insights from the device. She rigged up handheld versions of the resonance tool, small enough to carry but powerful enough to disrupt alien technology at close range. "We'll need these in every resistance cell," she said, her hands moving quickly as she soldered wires together. "If we can hit them where it hurts, we might be able to buy ourselves some breathing room." Daniel paced the room, his mind racing. He knew that possessing this knowledge came with immense responsibility and danger. If the architect discovered what they were doing, the retaliation would be swift and merciless. But Daniel also understood that hesitation wasn't an option. Every second they delayed gave the invaders more time to regroup and strike back. As dawn broke, the city outside remained eerily quiet. The lull in alien activity was unsettling, like the calm before a storm. Alex glanced out the window, his brow furrowed. "They're planning something big," he muttered. "This silence doesn't feel right." Maria nodded, her eyes glued to her screen. "Whatever it is, we need to stay ahead of them. Let's get these tools into the hands of the resistance groups. We can't do this alone." With the new weapons ready, the team split up to distribute them across the city. Daniel and Maria went to meet with local fighters holed up in abandoned warehouses, while Alex and Karen coordinated with underground networks operating in the suburbs. Each group carried copies of the alien data, ensuring that no single point of failure could doom their efforts. Their work didn't go unnoticed. As Daniel and Maria approached one of the resistance hideouts, they spotted movement in the shadows. Alien drones hovered nearby, their glowing sensors scanning the area. "We've got company," Daniel whispered, pulling Maria behind a stack of crates. They waited, hearts pounding, until the drones moved on. It was clear that the invaders were tightening their grip, hunting for any sign of rebellion. Later that evening, the team regrouped at the safe house. Everyone looked exhausted but determined. "The resistance is ready," Daniel said. "They're scared, but they're willing to fight. With these tools, we might actually have a shot." But their fragile optimism shattered when Alex received an alert on his laptop. "Guys, you need to see this," he said, his voice tight with urgency. On the screen was footage of the architect's forces attacking a distant city. The assault was brutal, leveling entire neighborhoods in minutes. What made it worse was the presence of the Mediator's faction, standing aside, watching silently as destruction unfolded. Maria clenched her fists, anger flashing in her eyes. "They're letting this happen. Even if the Mediator wants peace, their people are still killing us." Daniel shook his head, his expression grim. "It's not just about them anymore. This fight isn't just against the aliens. It's about proving to ourselves that we're worth saving." That night, the team finalized their strategy. Using the alien data, they identified key targets, supply depots, communication relays, and power hubs. If they could disable enough of these, they might force the architect's forces to retreat, or at least weaken them enough for humanity to strike a decisive blow. Karen handed out the last of the resonance devices, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "These won't win the war," she said, "but they'll give us a fighting chance." As they prepared to leave, Alex pulled Daniel aside. "What happens if we lose?" he asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, then placed a hand on Alex's shoulder. We don't have the luxury of thinking about losing. All we can do is keep moving forward, one step at a time. With those words, the team dispersed into the darkness, each member carrying the hope of billions on their shoulders. They didn't know what awaited them, but they knew one thing for certain. Humanity's survival depended on the choices they made next. And somewhere in the shadows, the Mediator watched, its allegiance torn between two worlds and two futures. The broadcast rippled across the globe like a shockwave, igniting both hope and chaos. People gathered around screens in homes, cafes, and makeshift shelters, watching as the decoded alien messages revealed their internal divisions. For many, it was the first time they truly believed humanity had a chance. Resistance groups sprang into action, emboldened by the knowledge that the invaders weren't united. But for Daniel, Maria, Alex, and Karen, the aftermath brought more danger than relief. Within hours of the broadcast, alien ships descended on major cities with renewed aggression. The Architects faction clearly saw the message as an act of defiance and a betrayal. Streets erupted in panic as energy blasts rained down, targeting areas suspected of harboring resistance fighters. In Chicago, Daniel and Maria watched from a rooftop as drones scoured the city below, their glowing eyes scanning for signs of rebellion. "They're looking for us," Maria said quietly, clutching her laptop tightly. Alex sat nearby, typing furiously to track the aliens' movements. His face was pale but determined. "They're focusing on communication hubs," he muttered. "They must think we're coordinating through those." Karen nodded grimly. "Which means we need to move, now. We can't stay here." The team packed up quickly, grabbing only what they could carry. Their basement hideout was no longer safe. Staying there would make them sitting ducks. As they slipped through back alleys, avoiding the chaos in the streets, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not just by the aliens, but by something else. Something closer. Their suspicions were confirmed when they reached a secluded park on the outskirts of the city. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and insect-like, its glowing eyes locking onto them. At first, they froze, ready to fight or flee. But then the alien spoke, not with words, but directly into their minds. "You have exposed truths that should remain hidden," it said, its voice calm yet firm. "But perhaps your actions are not entirely misguided." Maria stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I am the Mediator," the alien replied. "My faction seeks understanding, not annihilation. Your species is flawed, but erasing you would destabilize the balance of existence." Daniel exchanged a glance with Maria. This was the faction they'd glimpsed in the decoded messages, the ones arguing against the Architects' plans. Could they trust this creature? Or was it another trick? "We don't want war," Daniel said carefully, "but we won't surrender either. If you truly seek peace, help us." The Mediator hesitated, its body shifting slightly. "Helping you will mark me as a traitor to my own kind. Yet continuing down this path risks greater destruction for all of us." Karen stepped forward, her voice sharp. "If you're serious about coexistence, prove it. Give us something we can use to defend ourselves." For a long moment, the Mediator was silent. Then it extended one of its slender limbs, offering a small crystalline device. "This contains information about our technology, its strengths and weaknesses. Use it wisely." Maria took the device cautiously, her hands trembling. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because survival requires adaptation," the Mediator replied. "And because even the Architects of Destruction can be wrong." With that, the alien vanished into the shadows, leaving the team alone with the weight of its gift. Back at a new safe house, a cramped apartment borrowed from a sympathetic contact, they examined the device. It contained schematics, codes, and vulnerabilities far beyond anything they'd uncovered on their own. Alex's fingers flew across his keyboard as he integrated the data into their systems. "This changes everything," he said, his voice filled with awe. But Daniel remained cautious. "We still don't know if we can trust it," he said. "What if this is a trap?" Maria shook her head. "Even if it is, we don't have a choice. We have to take the risk." As they worked through the night, the city outside grew quieter. The aliens' attacks had paused, as if they were regrouping or planning something worse. Whatever came next, the team knew they were running out of time. But for now, they had a fragile lifeline and a glimmer of hope. Unbeknownst to them, the architect had already learned of the mediator's betrayal. The divide among the aliens was widening, and humanity's fate hung precariously in the balance. The team stumbled back to their makeshift headquarters, exhausted but triumphant. The destruction of the mining facility had been a success, and for the first time since the aliens' arrival, humanity had struck a meaningful blow. But as they collapsed into chairs around the cluttered table, the weight of what lay ahead began to sink in. Outside, the skies darkened with the ominous hum of alien ships converging on the area. It was clear the invaders weren't going to take this lying down. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "We've shown them we can fight back," he said, his voice firm, but laced with urgency. "But now they'll come harder and faster. We need to prepare." Maria nodded, her mind racing. She pulled out her laptop and opened files filled with data she gathered from the alien technology. "Their systems are vulnerable," she said. "If we can replicate the resonance device and distribute it, we might be able to cripple more of their operations. But we'll need help. Resources, people, everything." Alex glanced up from his own screen, where he was analyzing intercepted alien transmissions. "I found something," he said, his tone serious. "There's chatter about retaliation, but not all of it is hostile. Some of their messages suggest disagreement, like they're not sure how to respond." Karen raised an eyebrow. "Disagreement? You mean, like before? That hesitation we saw at the meeting?" "Exactly," Alex replied. "It seems like there's still a split among them. Maybe we can use that to our advantage." Daniel stood up, pacing the room. "If we expose this division, maybe we can turn them against each other. But we need proof. Something concrete to show the world that they're not invincible." Maria's eyes lit up. "What if we broadcast it?" she suggested. "If we can decode their internal communications and share it globally, people will see the truth. They'll realize the aliens aren't united. And that gives us hope." The idea was bold, but risky. Broadcasting such information would put a target on their backs, not just from the aliens but possibly from their own governments. World leaders were already divided on how to handle the invasion, and some had begun advocating for surrender. If the team acted without official approval, they could be labeled as traitors, or worse. Despite the risks, they decided to move forward. Alex worked tirelessly to refine the resonance device, while Maria focused on decoding the alien transmissions. Karen used her engineering skills to build portable versions of the device, small enough to be carried by resistance fighters across the globe. Daniel reached out to contacts within underground networks, spreading the word about their plan and rallying support. Days turned into nights as the team pushed themselves to the limit. Their small basement hideout became a hive of activity, filled with the hum of machines and the murmur of urgent conversations. Tensions ran high, but there was also a sense of purpose, a shared belief that they were making a difference. Finally, the moment came. Alex cracked the code, piecing together fragments of alien messages that revealed deep divisions within their ranks. One faction, led by the architect, remained committed to wiping out humanity. Another, represented by the mediator, argued that destroying Earth would destabilize the galaxy. The conflict between them was escalating, threatening to fracture the invaders' unity. Maria uploaded the decoded messages onto a secure server, preparing to broadcast them worldwide. As she worked, Daniel paced nervously. "This changes everything," he muttered. "If people see this, they'll know we have a chance." But not everyone agreed. A government official, tipped off about their activities, arrived at the hideout unannounced. He was a stern man in a dark suit, flanked by armed guards. "You're playing with fire," he warned. "If you release this, you'll provoke them. Are you prepared for the consequences?" Daniel met his gaze, unwavering. "We're already living with the consequences. Doing nothing isn't an option." The official hesitated, then sighed. "Do what you have to do," he said finally. "But don't expect us to protect you." As the man left, the team exchanged uneasy glances. They knew they were on their own, but they also knew they couldn't back down. Humanity's survival depended on taking a stand, no matter the cost. With trembling fingers, Maria hit the button to begin the broadcast. Across the globe, screens flickered to life, displaying the truth about the aliens' internal conflict. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, slowly, the tide began to turn. Resistance movements gained momentum, inspired by the revelation that the invaders weren't invincible. And somewhere in the shadows, the mediator watched, waiting for the right moment to act. The team gathered in the dim light of the basement, their faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens. Maria spread out a map of the Rocky Mountains on the table, pointing to a specific location marked with a red circle. "This is it," she said, her voice firm, but tinged with urgency. "The mining facility. If we can take it out, we cut off their supply of that rare element. Without it, their technology won't function properly." Daniel leaned over the map, studying the details. The facility was nestled deep in the mountains, heavily guarded by alien drones, and surrounded by steep cliffs. Getting close wouldn't be easy, but they had no other choice. Alex chimed in, tapping on his laptop. "I've been monitoring their communications," he said. "There's a pattern to their patrols. If we time it right, we can slip past them." Karen nodded, adding her thoughts. "We'll need explosives, something powerful enough to collapse the tunnels. I can rig up some charges using materials we already have." Her hands moved quickly as she sketched out a design for the devices. Despite her calm demeanor, there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. She wasn't just building weapons, she was fighting for survival. As the group finalized their plan, Maria returned to her research. She had been analyzing fragments of alien technology left behind during earlier encounters, hoping to uncover more weaknesses. One piece, a small metallic shard, caught her attention. Under a microscope, its surface revealed intricate patterns, almost like circuits. But what fascinated her most was the material itself. It wasn't just rare, it was fragile under certain conditions. Maria ran tests, exposing the shard to extreme temperatures and electromagnetic pulses. To her surprise, the material cracked when subjected to high-frequency vibrations. She shared her discovery with the team. "If we generate enough resonance at the right frequency," she explained, "we might not even need explosives. We could destabilize the entire facility from within." The idea was risky, but it gave them hope. They decided to combine both approaches. Karen would prepare the explosives as a backup, while Alex worked on modifying a device to emit the necessary frequency. Daniel took charge of logistics, mapping out escape routes and coordinating with local resistance groups who had agreed to provide support. The night before the mission, tensions ran high. None of them knew if they would make it back alive. In a quiet moment, Daniel found Maria sitting alone, staring at the shard under the microscope. "You okay?" he asked softly. She looked up, forcing a smile. "Just thinking," she said. "What if this doesn't work? What if we're wrong about all of this?" Daniel sat beside her, his voice steady. "We've come too far to doubt ourselves now. Even if we fail, we'll have shown them something they didn't expect. Unity. That's something they'll never understand." The next morning, the team set out before dawn. The journey to the mining facility was grueling, the mountain terrain unforgiving. They moved silently, sticking to shadows and avoiding detection. As they approached the site, Alex's device picked up signals from the alien guards. He adjusted the timing of their approach, ensuring they slipped through gaps in the patrol routes. When they reached the entrance, Karen handed out the explosives while Alex activated the resonance device. The air buzzed faintly as the machine hummed to life. Maria led the way inside, her heart pounding with every step. The tunnels were dark and narrow, lit only by eerie blue lights embedded in the walls. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the surfaces, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. They planted the explosives near key structural points, then retreated toward the main chamber where the mining operation was centered. Alex positioned the resonance device in the middle of the room, adjusting the frequency until the metallic walls began to vibrate. Cracks appeared, spreading rapidly across the surface. "It's working," Maria whispered, her voice filled with awe. But their success came at a cost. As they made their way back toward the exit, alarms blared, and the sound of alien drones echoed through the tunnels. The team sprinted, dodging blasts of energy as the invaders realized what was happening. Behind them, the facility groaned and collapsed, burying the precious element beneath tons of rock. They barely made it out alive, collapsing onto the cold ground outside as dust and debris rained down from the mountainside. For a moment, they simply lay there, catching their breath. Then Alex broke the silence with a grin. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." But their victory was short-lived. In the distance, more alien ships descended, drawn by the destruction. The battle was far from over, but for now, humanity had struck its first real blow against the invaders. The news of the failed negotiations spread like wildfire, sparking both fear and defiance across the globe. In Chicago, Daniel Carter and Maria Lopez returned to their makeshift headquarters, a cramped office filled with maps, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. The weight of the aliens' ultimatum hung over them, but neither was ready to give up. They knew that humanity's survival depended on finding a way to fight back, even if it seemed impossible. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit basement on the outskirts of the city, Alex Bennett sat hunched over a cluttered desk. His fingers flew across a keyboard as lines of code scrolled across his screen. Alex wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He was just a hacker with a knack for breaking into systems. But when the alien ships appeared, he realized his skills might be more valuable than ever. Across from him, Karen Monroe, a retired engineer with decades of experience building communication networks, leaned over his shoulder. "You're close," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Karen had spent years designing secure systems for the military before retiring to a quiet life. Now she found herself pulled back into the chaos, using her expertise to help Alex crack the aliens' encrypted signals. Together, they had been working tirelessly to disrupt the invaders' surveillance network, hoping to blind them to humanity's movements. So far, their progress was slow, but every small victory gave them hope. Back at the office, Daniel and Maria pored over the data Maria had gathered during the meeting with the aliens. Her discovery of subtle inconsistencies in their behavior had planted a seed of doubt in Daniel's mind. "If they're divided," he said, tapping a pen against the table, "then maybe we can use that against them. But how do we find out more?" Maria frowned, scrolling through pages of complex equations and signal patterns. "We need someone who can dig deeper into their systems," she said. "Someone who can get inside their heads, or whatever passes for heads with them." That's when Alex and Karen entered the picture. Through a mutual friend, Daniel and Maria learned about the duo's efforts to hack into the alien network. It didn't take long for them to track down the basement hideout. When they arrived, Alex looked up suspiciously, but Karen recognized Maria immediately. "You're the astrophysicist," she said, shaking Maria's hand. "I've read your papers." With little time to waste, the four of them got to work. Alex explained what he and Karen had uncovered so far: fragments of alien transmissions, hints of internal conflict, and glimpses of their technology's vulnerabilities. Maria's eyes lit up as she examined the data. "This is exactly what we need," she said. "If we can exploit these weaknesses, we might stand a chance." But not everyone shared their optimism. Around the world, governments argued over how to respond to the alien threat. Some leaders wanted to surrender, believing resistance would only lead to greater destruction. Others pushed for all-out war, convinced that humanity could prevail through sheer force. Caught in the middle were ordinary people, scared but determined to protect their homes. As days turned into weeks, Daniel and Maria grew frustrated with the lack of decisive action from world leaders. They decided to take matters into their own hands. With Alex and Karen's help, they began planning covert operations to sabotage key alien installations. Their first target was a mining facility located deep in the Rocky Mountains. According to Maria's research, the aliens were extracting a rare element critical to their technology. If they could destroy the facility, they might cripple the invaders' ability to wage war. The plan was risky, but the team knew they couldn't wait for permission. As they prepared for the mission, Daniel felt a mix of excitement and dread. He glanced at Maria, who was busy sketching out strategies on a whiteboard. Despite the gravity of their situation, there was something comforting about working alongside people who refused to give up. For the first time since the invasion began, Daniel allowed himself to believe that humanity might actually have a fighting chance. Little did they know, their actions were being watched, not just by the aliens, but by factions within their own ranks. The battle for Earth was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. The next morning, the world felt different. The usual sounds of bustling cities were replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by occasional whispers of fear and uncertainty. Governments scrambled to respond to the alien ultimatum, but decisions were slow to come. In Chicago, Daniel Carter found himself standing in front of a modest apartment building, clutching a piece of paper with an address scribbled on it. This was where Maria Lopes lived, and if anyone could shed light on the aliens' intentions, it was her. Maria opened the door cautiously, her dark hair tied back and a messy bun and glasses perched on her nose. She looked surprised to see him, but quickly ushered him inside. Her small living room was cluttered with books, papers, and computer screens displaying lines of data. On one screen, the alien broadcast played on a loop. Maria didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're Daniel Carter," she said, pointing to a framed photo on her desk of him speaking at a peace conference. "I recognize you." Daniel nodded. "And you're Maria Lopes. I've heard about your work. I need your help." He explained his hunch that the aliens weren't as united as they seemed. Maria listened intently, nodding occasionally. When he finished, she gestured to her laptop. "I think you're right," she said. "There's something off about their message. It's not just what they said. It's how they said it. There are layers here, patterns I'm still trying to decode." Before they could dive deeper into the discussion, Maria's phone buzzed. It was an official summons. Representatives from around the world had been selected to meet the aliens face to face. Both Daniel and Maria were on the list. They exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of them had expected this kind of direct involvement, but there was no turning back now. 2 days later, they arrived at the designated meeting site, a barren stretch of desert outside Phoenix, Arizona. The landscape was desolate, the air thick with dust and tension. A group of 30 humans stood together, flanked by soldiers armed with weapons that seemed laughably inadequate against the towering alien ships hovering above. When the aliens finally appeared, stepping out of a shimmering portal, the crowd fell silent. The creatures were unlike anything anyone had imagined. Tall and insect-like, their bodies gleamed with an iridescent sheen, and their large, glowing eyes scanned the humans with unnerving precision. They moved gracefully, almost elegantly, but their presence radiated power. One of them stepped forward, the leader, presumably. Its voice echoed in everyone's minds without sound, cold and commanding. "We have observed your species," it began. "Your capacity for destruction is unparalleled. Coexistence is impossible." Maria studied the aliens closely, her sharp eyes catching details others missed. Their movements weren't perfectly synchronized. Some hesitated slightly before responding to the leader's gestures, and when the architect spoke, another alien shifted ever so subtly, as if uncomfortable. These small inconsistencies fueled Maria's growing suspicion that not all aliens agreed with their leader's harsh stance. As the meeting dragged on, frustration mounted among the human delegates. The aliens offered no room for negotiation, no chance for compromise. Daniel tried to reason with them, appealing to whatever shred of logic or morality they might possess. "If you destroy us," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "you'll lose any chance to understand why we act the way we do. Isn't knowledge worth more than annihilation?" The architect paused, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. For a brief second, Daniel thought he saw doubt flicker across its expressionless face. But then it spoke again, its tone unyielding. "Your time for understanding has passed." When the meeting ended, the humans returned to their vehicles, dejected but determined. Maria pulled Daniel aside. "Did you notice?" she whispered urgently. "That hesitation, that shift in posture. They're not as unified as they want us to believe. If we can find a way to exploit that division, we might have a chance." Daniel nodded, hope flickering in his chest for the first time since the invasion began. The aliens thought humanity was predictable, chaotic, and weak. But what they didn't realize, what Daniel and Maria were beginning to understand, was that chaos could also be a strength, and if they played their cards right, it might just turn the tide in humanity's favor. The night sky over Chicago was unusually clear, the stars twinkling like tiny diamonds scattered across a black canvas. Daniel Carter stood by his apartment window, staring up at the heavens. He wasn't an astronomer or a dreamer. He was just a man who had seen too much of war and destruction in his life. Once a military strategist, now a vocal advocate for peace, Daniel often found himself lost in thought about humanity's place in the universe. Tonight, however, the universe seemed to have a message of its own. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. At first, it sounded like distant thunder, but then the ground beneath Daniel's feet began to vibrate. He turned toward the city skyline, where something massive was descending. It wasn't alone. Dozens, no, hundreds of enormous ships appeared in the sky, hovering silently above every major city on Earth. They were sleek, metallic, and utterly alien. Panic erupted instantly. Car alarms blared, people screamed, and streets flooded with terrified citizens trying to figure out what was happening. Daniel didn't move. His heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He had faced chaos before, both in battlefields and boardrooms. This was different, though. These weren't missiles or armies. This was something far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. The ships stayed motionless for several minutes, as if studying the planet below. Then, without warning, every television, radio, and phone screen flickered to life. A voice, deep, cold, and mechanical, spoke in perfect English. "Humans," it said, "we are the architects. Your species has proven itself incapable of responsible stewardship of this world. You wage endless wars, consume resources recklessly, and endanger the balance of existence. Surrender now, and we will spare your lives. Resist, and you will be eradicated." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving silence in its wake. Across the globe, people froze in shock. Was this real? Could it be some kind of elaborate hoax? For Daniel, there was no doubt. This was real, and it was terrifying. But what struck him most wasn't the threat. It was the tone. There was no anger, no malice, just a cold, calculated assessment, as if humanity were nothing more than a problem to be solved. In another part of the city, Maria Lopes sat hunched over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. She had been monitoring strange signals in space for weeks, but she never imagined they would lead to this. As an astrophysicist, Maria thrived on solving puzzles. And right now, the biggest puzzle of all was unfolding before her eyes. When the alien's message aired, she recorded it immediately, running algorithms to analyze every word, every pause, every inflection. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. Beneath the surface of the broadcast, hidden within the frequencies of the audio, was a pattern, a code. It wasn't random noise. It was deliberate. Whoever these aliens were, they weren't speaking with one unified voice. There were contradictions in their message, subtle inconsistencies that hinted at disagreement among them. Maria leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. If the aliens weren't united, maybe they weren't invincible either. Back in his apartment, Daniel grabbed his coat and headed outside. The streets were chaotic, but he moved through the crowd with purpose. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start looking. Maria Lopes might not be a household name, but in scientific circles, she was a rising star. If anyone could make sense of this, it was her. As Daniel stepped into the cool night air, he glanced up at the alien ships again. They loomed overhead like silent gods, watching, waiting. Whatever came next, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Humanity's survival depended on understanding the enemy and finding a way to fight back.